Welcome, everybody, to our first Christian Apologetics Google Plus Community Hangout on air. That was a mouthful. Tonight, we are celebrating hitting our 500 member milestone with a conversation about apologetics issues, current events, and just the deep questions that everybody wonders about. Or maybe not, I don't know. So tonight what we're going to do is we have a couple of moderators, just two, myself and Aaron, and we're each going to talk about one or two topics tonight, and just going to have a good conversation. And we'll set up one of these every time we add another 500 members, so keep inviting people and keep the conversation going. Alrighty. Alright, Aaron, why don't you take it away?
Well, I'm going to start with one of my favorite subjects, digging into old textual criticism. I find it's a great place to start. One that's actually highly neglected because we focus so much in apologetics strictly on science and its relation to the Bible that I think oftentimes we actually neglect and forget the Bible. And by digging deeper into the word itself in the original languages, talk about Koine Greek and Paleo Hebrew, even to a point Aramaic, I think that we actually get a lot of answers that we're looking for. One thing, like one of my favorite, professors, Michael Heiser says, we need to let the Bible be the Bible in the context that it is in, and that is ancient Semitic culture, often ancient Canaanite culture, and we need to let it be that. Once we start from that viewpoint, we can understand the Bible more so for what it's trying to tell us. So we can dig into the sons of God first off, and that's one topic that I like to dive into because it answers a lot of questions. One of the reasons that a lot of people get upset, Christians, atheists, pagans alike, is because of the slaughter across the Old Testament. People often say that God is unrighteous, that God plays favorites, that God, etc., etc. Make whatever else up you want along the lines. But nothing could be further from the truth, because if you go back into Genesis, Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, actually I can pull it up too, you'll find that God is actually trying to defend humankind and teaching humans how to defend themselves. So if you go into there, you realize that it was actually these sons of God are B'nai Ha Elohim. Uh, they are literally the direct creations of God. Um, from my research, they probably sit a little higher than angels. They're the sons of God. They are the archons over nations, the rulers over nations. Um, and we have a very generic way of thinking about angels. When we say angels, we often think of these big, beautiful, shining beings with big, feathery wings, and nothing could be further from the truth. These beings look very much like us from all biblical accounts, um, and yet they are much more powerful. These beings, from the biblical accounts, are both good and evil. And you see that contextually throughout the Old Testament. And the ones that did disobey, like I said, like in Genesis 6, um, they fell, they took human wives, and according to the text, and this is supported by extra biblical text as well, um, they had half-breed children, and they were what's called the Nephilim. Uh, People argue back and forth about what the term actually means. Some will tell you it means the fallen. Other people will tell you that it means to fall. Other people will say it doesn't mean that at all. regardless, they're half-breed children that were between the fallen angels and human people. Um, and I will say this because a lot of people will try to say that they were the divine sons of Seth. That idea is a much later development. It was Julius Africanus was the first one to suggest it, and Augustine was really the first one to teach it. But nowhere in the first 400 years of the church was that ever proposed, and it was never proposed before the church. You will not find that in any ancient texts, not in the Bible, not in the Dead Sea Scrolls, not in any of the writings of Josephus or Tacitus or any of the early historians, Herodotus, none of them. The first one to propose the idea was Julius Africanus, and then, of course, the first one to teach it was Augustine. And a lot of it had to do with politics as well. Um, but those children are the whole reason the flood came about. It wasn't so much just human sinning, it was the fact that they were causing these half breeds to destroy humankind and commit ungodly sins. By ungodly sins, it went way beyond your standard, cursing and extramarital affairs. That they were actually going so far as to create half breeds, humans as well as animals and beasts, and a lot of theologians will tell you this is where the mythical beasts come from that you'll see inside ancient mythologies. And you can cross-check some of this if you go through, like, say, the Anunnaki was a tribe that was spoken of um, by Sumerians, and they have a lot of the same stories. Ugaritic stories have a lot of the same stories, linguistics, everything else. You see it across Egypt. It's spoken of, like I said, across many ancient cultures. It's well documented across many ancient cultures. Extra biblical books like the Book of Enoch, uh, which once again, let's clear something up. The the Book of Enoch, I'm not claiming it is inspired, okay, but it is quoted over and over and over again in the New Testament. It's quoted well over 100 times. It's definitely directly quoted in Jude. Uh, Peter makes references to it. There's references to it inside the Book of Revelation, and even Jesus quotes from it. So, anybody who wants those references, I can give it to you. Now, I'm not saying it's inspired, but obviously there's things in there that were considered worthy of thought and instruction. So we need to read it. We should read it because that's how they thought. That's how the ancient uh, Jews, Jewish people, they studied from it. So we should study from it. Same thing with the book of Jashar. The book of Jashar is one of those that the Bible actually tells you to read in two places. There's many books that we don't have anymore from the Bible. We do have the book of Jashar. We do have the book of Jubilees. We do have the book of Enoch. Book of Enoch is directly quoted uh, in two places in both Samuel and I believe it's Kings.
Ooh,
Oh,
sorry, I
that's
hit the
okay.
wrong button. Keep
That's
going.
all right. In both places, you are told to actually reference it, and it actually uses the Book of Jasher as validation for the scriptures. They go so far as to say the rest of the story is in the Book of Jashar, using it for validation purposes. And Jubilees is often referred to by many of the early historians. It's referenced by Talmudic rabbis and stuff like that. So all the early resources will tell you what these creatures were doing. Height is disputed back and forth. Um, some people will try to tell you that 3,000 Ls can be as high up as 450 feet. I doubt that. Um, a lot of the measurements that we actually get from historical reports in text will tell you that the giants were probably more along the lines of like 9 feet, which seems to be what the Bible also goes along with. And some of it may even be from ancient terminology, uh, words of expression. Like we may say some things are cool, right? Doesn't mean it's cold, but so it brings somebody from the past to the present. If we say cool, they're gonna think cold. If I say, back in the '80s, I would have said it's heavy. But these are expressions and stuff, and that we adopt in our culture, in our linguistics, in our verbiage, and we don't know how much of that played effect inside some of the earlier texts, like the Book of Enoch. So when they say something like 3,000 ells, that may have simply been an expression that was used to mean, hey, they're really big. So we have to be very careful about how literally we take what is probably just simply expressions. So, but from those texts, we know literally that they were supposed to be sons of God, okay, and daughters of men, and these creatures rode havoc across the earth. So if you look at all of the early tribes that Yahweh, the God of Israel, um, or as they would say, Yahweh Elohim, are told to go forth and slaughter, these are tribes that intermixed with the Nephilim. And then after the flood, instead of hearing Nephilim, a lot of times you'll hear Rephaim, which often refers to the descendants of the Nephilim. So there's actually literally some sites will tell you, some scholars will tell you there was almost 36 tribes of potential Nephilim across the Old Testament. So I think that once we start taking to effect what we're actually taught in the Old Testament, the defense of Israel, of the Nephilim and offsprings of Nephilim, and the intermixing of the human genome, and the defense of that is what the slaughter was all about. So,
Well, my hat's off to you for tackling this issue.
thanks.
Um, Before I go any further, I just want to welcome Kevin to the Hangout
Hey, all
tonight.
right, Kevin.
Kevin, it doesn't seem like I am able to unmute you for some reason. But I will say hello to you. I don't know if there's a hardware issue going on here. I'll toss you up on the screen.
Good to have you tonight, Kevin.
Oh. Yeah, looks like we're having some technical difficulties here, but Kevin is one of our other moderators, so I just wanted to welcome him. Did not expect Kevin. Too bad. Maybe next time we'll actually get to hear him talk or see him.
Can't seem to unmute.
Yeah, it's weird.
Did you try on the top of the screen? On the top of the screen, they have the little icons, like mute and unmute up there on the top.
Yeah, I'm using some apps here for the Hangouts, and they're not giving me the option to unmute. I'll click it and it doesn't do anything. So.
Okay.
All right, Kevin. Maybe next time. Maybe there's something on your end. I don't know, but. Hey, if you want to throw up some questions or comments in the chat here, I'll pass them along for you and we can talk about them. But I wanted to throw my hat off to Aaron here because something that I always tell people
Thank you.
is that I do think that the Old Testament is problematic. That's something that I have difficulty with too. Something that we say in the Christian Apologetics community is that we're not here because we have all the answers. We just are honest that there are questions and we want to explore them. So I don't claim to have answers about some of the things in the Old Testament, and it's a complex collection of works anyway, so it would take a lot of effort, like something along the lines of what Aaron's putting into it right now. What are you going to school for right now, Aaron?
Both at I'm at Koinonia Institute, um, working my way through Koinonia. Later, I'll take the transcript over to Louisiana Baptist University to finish my degree. But I'm going into biblical studies, biblical research. I'm looking for a degree in that, and then I'm currently doing Greek under Michael Heiser.
Gotcha. Cool. So basically, your approach here is that this is all about the human genome.
Yes,
Okay. And the genome was being contaminated by celestial beings.
yes.
Okay.
I think
Go ahead.
one of the key verses to support that is if you go into Genesis, it'll tell you that Noah was perfect in his generations.
Hmm.
And if you take the literal interpretation of that, it means that his generations were clean and untainted.
Do you happen to know the passage?
Let me see. Pull it up for you.
Anytime you want to throw something up on the screen, just let me know. Looks like I've got a working computer for the time being.
You got it. Working off a keyboard right now. My study Bibles are all downstairs. All right. This time, walk with the Lord. I know it's right around 6. I know it's right around Genesis 6.
Alright, well, if you think of it, or if you just want me to throw up anything on the screen, let me know and I'll toss it up there.
You've got
I've got
it.
your PDF documents here, so ready to go
Awesome.
on that front.
Well,
Okay,
it's.
so
Oh, go
it's
ahead.
the genome. It's all about the genome, and Noah was perfect in his generations, which is an interesting thing to say.
Yes. Like I said, the literal interpretation of that meant clean in his generations, clean in his genes. So, or untainted, as we would say. Um, you might hear out in the country where people will say, "Man, that boy just got good genes." Something along those
Yes.
lines.
Yep. And the other interesting thing that you pointed out was, I mean, somebody who's just hearing this for the first time, it's sounds like a pretty incredible story. Um, but what's interesting that you also pointed out was that the populations that were disposed of, they had a connection to the Nephilim.
Yeah, yeah. There was if you go through, a lot of the descendants were are referenced, and it takes a long time to go through it. We won't try to go through all the passages now, but anybody who does, I can reference you to several sites.
Mm-hmm.
um, if you once you start going through a lot of them, and which is why they were wiped out to begin with. But a lot of them were known for mixing. In fact, there's several passages that link Sodom and Gomorrah to actually mixing with angels. And believe it or not, it's actually referenced from the New Testament and the Old Testament. So it's kind of fascinating. Um, in fact, the term being given in marriage in the New Testament was literally being given in marriage. In other words, a blessing was given from father. It's a word of betrothal. So they were literally giving their daughters unto all these events.
Hmm.
So it's
So, all right, I want to explore this just a little
let's
bit.
see. I do know that if you cross-reference Nephilim, Zuzim, Zumzaman, Rephaim, Emim, I know if you reference any of those, um, some people also say the Hittites. Um, I know the Amalekites were known to be mixed inside of there. What's fascinating too is that the Amalekites were also known as the Hyksos, and the Hyksos are the ones that actually invaded Egypt in the later half of the Middle Kingdom.
Hmm. There's so many connections here.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just trying to throw that passage up on the screen, but I'm having some issues with it, so we're just going to keep
Okay.
talking.
Okay.
Um, so now my question, I don't know if you've pondered this before. I don't have any answers. Why do you think that this was important? Um, why was it important to keep the genome free of these celestial beings?
Well, there are several reasons for this.
Maybe you have thought about this.
For one, I believe, and I cannot give you a full passage for this, okay, but taking the body of evidence, I believe that who we would call Lucifer in Hebrew, his name is actually Hallel ben Shachar. Um, Later in Latin, they would refer to him as Lucifer, bringer of light, and that which is what Ben Hallel Shachar means. Um, when people say the devil is actually a generic term. Satan in the Old Testament is actually is actually never talking about Lucifer. We could go into that later. Um, in the Old Testament, whenever you see the word, I should say the title of Satan or the Satan, that is never a reference to Lucifer. Um, but I believe that he's trying to create a master race. And one of those reasons is to increase his ranks. Because according to the book of Enoch, let me back up a little bit. Let me preface this. When you go into the Bible and you read about evil spirits and you read about fallen angels, there seems to be a difference because fallen angels inhabit the air. They apparently can fly. When you see Lucifer in the New Testament, he actually transports, in some fashion, uh, uh, Jesus from spot to spot to spot, kingdom to kingdom. Um, they have abilities. Who knows if it's advanced technology or if it's some form of spirituality we aren't aware of? Who knows? But he's able to take them from kingdom to kingdom to kingdom. And so they have abilities, they have powers. Even in Jude, it says that Michael didn't fight Lucifer, but simply said, "The Lord rebuke you." Um, Kind of fascinating. But then you look at evil spirits, whom we would call demons. You look at evil spirits, and Jesus is always casting them out. Tells his disciples to cast him out. Says that all of his disciples can cast him out. That they have to yield to his name. They have to. So there seems to be a distinct difference between fallen angels and demons, or shadim in Hebrew. And
Huh.
when you look at it, you see a difference. And one of the things I wondered when I was younger, because I saw a slight difference, I didn't understand how, hey, how come this fallen angel is powerful over here but not over here? How come they have to go into the bodies of pigs? Okay, but Lucifer is able to transport Christ to any kingdom in the world. It's you see this difference, and it's like, what's going
Yeah.
on here? Well, if you go into the book of Enoch, I believe it's right about chapter 15. Okay, you'll actually see where he explained it. In fact, let me see if I can bring it up for you, because you actually can read this for free online. If you go to sacredtexts.org.
Now,
um, yes.
if you hit screen share, I don't know if you know how to do that. You can put that up
Okay.
on your camera
Which
view.
means I will have to switch computers.
Oh, but if it's too complicated, don't worry about it.
I'll try. Let's see. There we go. And we'll shoot out for that. And if you go to, where are There you go. Sacred text. Oh, now they
Woo!
changed it. Now it's sacredtext.com.
At the
Okay.
bottom.
Okay, so we shoot up here. Let's see, I believe it is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Some of it's going to be in 10. Some of it's going to be over in 15. Really, the first like 16 chapters tell a huge story. Um, let's go right about here. No shot. And I will shoot over here for you. Forgiven. Okay. By the way, you can download the PDFs online for free too. Just look for Book of Enoch PDF. It'll take you directly to download links for it. That's right here somewhere. Should be about chapter 15. And when you go in there, um, here we go. Okay, so here it is. Let me see if I can share this.
Combining the forces of all of our computers.
Let's see, Q&A, showcase, screen share. Okay. Let's see. Oh, look, there's my Logos Bible software too. Cool.
Hey, I like how you've got your own brand on your hat.
Oh, thank you. You like that? These are fight hats.
Oh, I need to get some kind of a hat or something with my name on it. It's one of my life goals.
It's pretty cool. It wasn't cheap. I think it was like $40, I think. Okay, I think you can see this now.
Ooh.
Can you see that right there?
Yes, I can see that. That's pretty cool.
Okay. So if you see, it says, shooting down a little bit, it says, though ye were holy, spiritual, living the eternal life, you have defiled yourselves with the blood of women, and have begotten children with the blood of flesh. And as the children of men have lusted after flesh and blood, as those also do who die and perish. Therefore have I given them wives also, that they might impregnate them and beget children by them, that thus nothing might be wanting them on earth. But you were formerly spiritual, living the eternal life, and immortal for all generations of the world, and therefore I have not appointed wives for you, for as the spiritual ones of the heavens, in heaven is their dwelling. And now the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and shall they be called. As for the spirits of heaven, in heaven shall be their dwelling. But as for the spirits of the earth, which were born upon the earth shall be their dwelling. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger, and thirst, and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men, and against the women, because they have proceeded from them. So that right there tells you where demons come from.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Um, Especially because there seems to be a lot of question about whether the Nephilim and these giants were human beings or if they were some kind of hybrids or what. And this extra biblical information seems to corroborate the idea that this was some kind of celestial human hybrid situation going on here.
Yeah, I would agree. And I know some people, down the Book of Enoch, but we have to remember it is a source that the apostles and Jesus used. So just like Michael Heiser says, you don't have to believe that it's inspired, but you should still read it because they read it. So if they read it, we should read it because that puts us in the mindset of what they're trying to teach us across the epistles and in the New Testament.
Yeah, well, and then there's so much that it's so hard to make sense of unless you take the time to
Yeah, exactly. And you just broke out, so I'm not sure if you're saying something right now. Are you there? Are you there, Brandon? There you go. I can hear you again.
Oh, you can hear me? Okay, good. So
Yeah.
all of this is to the point about.
Oh, I lost you again. You still there? Okay. Oh, there you are.
Oh,
I hear you.
did you push a button?
No, I started to, but I stopped because your voice came back.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're gone again. Sorry, we seem to be experiencing technical difficulties. I think let me test my side, make sure I'm still on. Let's see. I'm going to actually pull a speed test to see if I am still on myself. Let's see. Let's go. There you go. I want to make sure I'm not dropping out. Okay, so far so good. It's loading. Okay, let's see what I'm getting on Wi-Fi. I'm actually 2 floors up from where my Wi-Fi is. Because my Wi-Fi is in the basement and I'm in the attic. So let's see what I'm getting. Whew! I'm getting almost 30 down. That's pretty doggone good. Okay. So I'm definitely connected. 30 down, 2 floors up is pretty good. Let's see what my upload is, because that's just as important. Your upload is just as important. Let me see. I got 5 up. Okay, so I'm still connected. I think I'm the only one in the Hangout right now. We're experiencing technical difficulties. Oh, wait. There we go. I can hear you again.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, excellent.
See how long this lasts. It was me the whole time.
Okay.
Surprise, surprise.
I wasn't sure. I was uh I was testing just to make sure.
All right. Do you have any other topics, or you want it to be my turn in the hot seat?
um, let's see. The Let me conclude one thing real quick.
Hmm?
Um, I've covered sons of God. And we can cover more of that later. I do want to say we have to stop enforcing what we want to be God into the Bible. Um, Even the term Elohim that we use for the Bible does not actually mean God. I'm going to bring this up on purpose. I think I just lost Brandon again. Oh, I hear you. I hear you. There you are. Oh, maybe. Um, I'm going to keep rolling. The reason why I bring up the term Elohim does not mean God is because it shows that we are enforcing what we believe to be the attributes of God into the Bible. Um, Elohim is actually used. Here, I'll give you a few references. It's used of the God of the Bible, okay, over 2,000 times. But it is also used of the sons of God, ones that we might call the archons, the rulers over principalities. That's where you get Paul making references to it in the New Testament. We battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and rulers. And these are actually different tiers of three different tiers of spiritual beings that he's referencing. If you look that up in Greek, Koine Greek, you'll see it's actually cross-referenced as three different tiers of spiritual beings. But it's also used of these archons. Okay, so Elohim is also used if you go to Psalm 82. There's a reference in 89. You'll see that these beings, these archons, are referred to as Elohim. The very first verse actually says, Elohim stands in the council of El. And then it makes reference and says that he is more or less yelling at the other Elohim. So Elohim does not mean God. In fact, in 1 Samuel 28:13, when the witch of Endor sees Samuel come up, she says, I see an Elohim. If you go, there's angels in Genesis 35:7. Angels are referenced as Elohim. So the term Elohim literally means a being from the other realm, or a disembodied being. Okay, so when we see Elohim, we shouldn't say it's God. When we see Elohim, we need to know that it is a placement name, not an attribute name. So Elohim means somebody who is coming from the other realm, a more or less a disembodied person, angel, or God. Okay, so I will get that out of the way because that has been a misconstrued concept for generations. So Elohim, disembodied person, spirit, or God, and literally God, because the Bible never says that there are not other gods. It says that Yahweh is the creator, and he's created all the other Elohim. He's created all the other gods. If you go to Deuteronomy 32, starting at like 32:8, it says that when the nations were separated according to the heavenly assembly, some will say, and others will say divine council, and others it will say the sons of God. That term is B'nai Ha-Elohim. That term literally is referencing sons of God, and it's the same ones you'll see later where they call them Elohim. That passage is referenced as calling them both B'nai Elohim there, and later calling them Elohim straight up. So that is a concept that we have to let go of. Yahweh Elohim is creator, and he is the one who has created all existence. When we take that and acknowledge that and apply original concepts with original language, it means a lot more.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. I can hear you.
Okay, switch computers. All right. Now, again, my hat's off to you because this can be a very risky thing to talk about. You're talking about the language here, so you're saying how do we use this word God, quote unquote, and you're saying to use it in a way different from how we usually hear it, which is
I
very
am.
challenging. But I think sometimes we do get caught up in words and terminology and labels in particular, so that we forget what these words actually mean. And it's the meaning behind them that's the important thing, and not so much where we apply specific words. It's the meaning that it carries. So
I
I think
agree.
in principle, it's really good to explore these kinds of issues that you're raising.
I agree. Thanks. I appreciate it.
So I know that you have and probably will continue to catch flack for some of these ideas.
Oh, I have no doubt.
Don't mind me while I adjust the candelabra here in the background.
Not at all. I love your shirt, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. We coexist. In reference to different technology brands, though.
Oh yeah,
I'm not talking
I
about.
have two of them right in front of me.
Oh, you're like a hybrid.
I am. I am.
Yahweh doesn't take kindly to that. Okay, so it still seems problematic for me. Um, the issue of wiping out hybrid civilizations.
Okay.
So, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little more. I think I probably missed some of the things that you were talking about, but you have to talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old, basically.
Not a problem.
um,
Um, Not that I think of you that way. I'm just saying.
that's okay.
I'm just like, not a problem. I have 5-year-olds, so so
Right. I only have 2-year-olds so far.
um, well, these giants, which seem to have decreased um, after the flood, their heights seem to have decreased after the floods, because if you look at the references before the floods, they appear to be much more of the, say, 9 foot level, whereas they appear to be decreasing in height after the floods, more of the, say, 6 to 8 foot level, not so much big, and they're described as actually being doubly as wide and as big as well. Now, I really don't think that they just went away. Now, here's a huge controversial subject that no scholar really agrees on. How many incursions were there? Simply said, the incursion meaning how many times did the sons of God fall and commit fornication with human women? We know that the original fall had to be sometime between before and during Eden, okay, because Lucifer was already in the garden. Okay, so that's before anybody ever existed except for Adam and Eve. Okay, so he must have rebelled before that, because that's when the curse is pronounced on him. So it had to be somewhere, somewhere Eden or before that. I'll say it could be before that, because if you take the literal interpretation of the of Genesis, I believe it's Genesis 1:2, um, where it says that uh, the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. Um, that term, literally translated, does not say that. When you take that directly from the Hebrew and the Greek, it says that the earth was unseen and unprepared, and it says that the Spirit of God hovered over darkness. Now, the darkness that's referenced is the same darkness that's used for the darkness of death. That's in Genesis, when the first or Exodus, when all the firstborn are taken. So
Huh.
literally, that's the darkness that's referenced as darkness of death. Um,
Huh.
and it says that it hovered over darkness and the abyss. So the abyss actually existed before Eden existed, which is kind of interesting.
So the whole history, we think of the story of Adam and Eve as kind of the beginning. I mean, I think a lot of people think of it that way. But
So something existed before we were even here, because Yahweh created the abyss before he created Eden. So, which kind of adds to the thought that, you know, the abyss and Hades was created for angels, not for humans, because when it was created, humans didn't exist yet.
I see.
So, I'm expanding on it a little bit. Yes, it's very controversial, but um,
I think you did. Was it you who posted something about this in
I
the
did,
community?
I
I
did,
thought so.
and I had people cross-check me in the Hebrew as well, and said the same thing.
Hmm.
And now we know that in Genesis 6 there was the incursion, the initial incursion, because it says the sons of God cohabited with women, like we were just explaining. So we know that was the first what we call incursion. Okay. However, there's a reference in there that says that the sons of God came down and also after. So the context seems to indicate that there was a second incursion after the flood. So, and actually, the root words literally do translate as before and after. So there may have been two incursions where these angelic beings had relations with people. So they may have never
Okay.
stopped. The only reason why God may have done the flood is to stop them from wiping out all of mankind.
So, what you're saying is that the creation of human beings um, was kind of in danger. It was going to be wiped out through attrition, kind of.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean that seems to be what the scripture indicates for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So if once you go through, and I firmly believe that is why, and the scripture seems to indicate that is why Yahweh Elohim taught the people how to defend themselves by showing them how to go in and wipe out these hybrid tribes. Because I really, the scripture seems to indicate that Lucifer was trying to create a master race to wipe out mankind, wipe out the image of God, and put his own image over the planet and enforce his will.
Okay, so you've got basically a narrative of two competing creators, in a sense. The ultimate creator, Yahweh, and then some other celestial being that's trying to create in its
Yeah,
own image.
right.
Okay. Hmm.
So, I mean, and like I said, you can cross reference these thoughts too, because not only does it make reference to it in Genesis and the book of Enoch and Jubilees, it also makes reference to it in the Ugaritic tablets, the Sumerian tablets, and there's even some references inside cuneiform. So,
So there's extra biblical sources that corroborate kind of some of this story,
yeah,
some of this narrative.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Huh. A lot of information there.
I try.
A lot of information in that brain.
Well, for my own good, um, let me give you a little background of why I started doing this. Is because I was when I was younger, I was Catholic, okay, and then my parents did a complete reversal and started turning us into Pentecostal churches. So went from Catholic to Pentecostal,
Uh-huh.
and I'm really the only one old enough to remember the Catholic Church. I'm the oldest of five, and I was actually baptized in the Catholic Church. I was the only one allowed to attend with my grandmother when she went to services. So for years after that, when my other siblings didn't go, I still was going to Catholic services because to accompany my grandmother. So, but so I was still under exposure, and for years after that, including after I met my wife, I mean, I had a long stint of where I just didn't want to believe long history. Whoever wants to know, I'll show you the. I have a YouTube video where I have like my presentation of my younger life. I won't go over that here because it takes too long. But
Aaron Apologetics.
but then I was I was in Pentecostal for a long time after I came back to the faith, and I could just never could reconcile a lot because they're it was very Western mindset. Okay, very churchy, very. And I couldn't find the answers I was looking for. Little pieces of it, but not as a whole. And so that's when I decided, you know what? I need to just throw out everything I've ever learned, forget what church has taught me, and I need to start at scratch. And I need to dig into the Bible myself and start learning for myself.
Hmm.
And so that's when I joined Koinonia Institute. I looked forever because I wanted to find one that wasn't too heavily biased into any particular denomination. So I got into Coordinate Institute, who expands on a lot of cool concepts, deep into apologetics,
Yeah.
and started studying under Michael. I started studying material from Michael Heiser because Michael Heiser, by far, is the most unbiased scholar I've ever ran across. And always highly suggest his teachings because they are pretty much naked Bible. He's not teaching any doctrine. It's naked
Yeah.
Bible.
I really like what you're saying because um, I think if you're going to get into apologetics and if you're going to take the brave step of asking questions, allowing yourself to consider honest questions with no guarantees that you will find satisfactory answers, you have to be prepared to challenge things that you've always been taught or things that you currently believe and be willing to change some of those things and just look honestly at these things. It's scary, and there's so much information. There's so many apologetics topics. I mean, what are the odds that anybody has it all absolutely correct
Nobody.
on a first endeavor to get into apologetics? So you have to be really open-minded, especially like you pointed out in terms of the terminology that you use and some of these just semantic boxes that we tend to put ourselves into that really hinder a coherent understanding of the Bible and of the Christian faith. So I just like what you're saying about you have to first and foremost approach apologetics with an open mind, that and it may not lead to entirely traditional views all the time or
Most of the time.
traditional language
You're right.
at the very least.
Yeah. It definitely original context. And here's where I have to say most people, most teachers will tell you, well, we need to keep the Bible in context. And then they'll tell you what the context is, but then they always have the denominational spin on it. And so that's where it's hard to find straight teaching on just what the Bible says contextually, not just in verbiage, because verbiage doesn't mean anything unless we can put it in context. Like I said
Agreed.
earlier, yeah, like I said earlier, in the 80s, I would have said, hey, that's heavy. Okay. If you tell it to an Egyptian, he's going to start looking for weights, right? So we have to remember that there is verbiage. There's things we have to take into context. So we have to take actual language along with the language, linguistics in the language, in context culturally for each passage when we go into it. So, which changes throughout the Bible, by the way, because the Bible is written across 2,000 years. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you know what? I'm going to go ahead and wrap up my part, and I'm going to let you go.
Okay, sounds good. All right. I'm going to actually take about a 10-20 second break for a minute and then we will get back to it. I'm going to talk a little bit about science.
Cool. I like
Alrighty.
science.
Cool. And here we go.
Nice.
So, I am back.
All right.
Alright, cool. Now, um, so I want to talk about science, and because I love science. But what's kind of interesting, though, is that science, I think most of the time people talk about science, they're starting at a higher level, let's say theism. So they're trying to talk about or prove or find evidence for theism. And then, from a lot of atheists actually point out that, hey, even if you prove that God exists, or if you find evidence for God existing, then it still doesn't prove that your religion is correct. So we've kind of did it backwards here a little bit. We talked about one of the lower level details of a specific religion, Christianity. I guess you could also say some of the other Abrahamic religions. And then we've gone higher level to science, which is what I want to talk about. But just as an introduction to myself, that's kind of how my faith has gone. I was raised in church.
Oh, you're cutting out.
Oh, am I still here?
There you are. There you are. You're back.
Okay. Sometime in high school, um, I came across some website. I heard of this thing called ex-Christians, and that was really scary to me. And that was a real challenge to my faith. I guess I was about 18 years old, and I had to really think about what I actually believed, because these were people who knew my faith as well as I did, and yet they decided they didn't believe anymore for whatever reason. So I did basically the same thing that you were saying, where I just, everything is on the table now, and I just have to figure out for myself what I believe. And that process went on for a number of years, well into college. I would even say beyond college a little bit, and even is ongoing today. But the first thing I had to establish in my mind was, do I believe that God exists? And one of the influential things for me was the intelligent design movement, which I know atheists won't agree with this, but disconnects itself from any semblance of religion. Uh, so it's not an argument based on the Bible or any kinds of texts like that, historical texts. It's based on various methods of scientific reasoning, which I'm not going to get into right now. I actually have something else to talk about. But I developed this very high level idea that, okay, I think God exists, and now what do I think about Christianity? And I developed more and more specific beliefs, and some of those beliefs started as very provisional beliefs and then solidified. And then even today, now, I have, I'm really solid on my belief in God, and then I'm solid on my belief in Christianity for various reasons. I think it's a unique religion um, for various reasons. And then I still have some beliefs that I would call provisional, which fit within the larger framework that I've been developing for a number of years. But these are provisional beliefs. I can't prove them, um, but they fit the larger interpretive framework. And so that's kind of where I am in terms of my faith. So that's my introduction to myself. And what I want to talk about is a pretty interesting piece of news that I read about recently. And I don't know if my computer's going to cooperate right now to allow me to pull this up, but let me just read it off the computer here. Basically, now evolution obviously is a really important topic, or it's a really hot topic. And some people
Okay.
think it's important. Yeah, some people think it's important to religion. Some people think it's neutral to religion. I happen to think it's important because if you take a theistic evolutionist point of view, which I know many Christians do, if you take that point of view, well, the thing about God is that if God's omnipotent or whatever, then you could say that anything is compatible with his existence. Okay, so you can never say that evolution disproves God. I totally understand that argument. I don't think that makes for a very strong God hypothesis, but you can say that God is compatible with evolution. I agree with that. But from my point of view, the more important issue is not whether or not God is compatible with evolution, but whether evolution relegates God to the chopping board of Occam's razor. And I think it does, if true, or to a large extent it does, if evolution is true. And the reason for that is theists, and even in the Bible itself, it says that the evidence for God is all throughout nature. I heard a talk recently by David Berlinski, and he traced the history, some of the philosophical thought about this in religion, in the Christian traditions, and he was talking about how throughout history it's been believed that yes, we have this book of life in the Bible, but then you have the natural book of life, and you have even some popes talking about this and saying these two different books of life, the scriptures and then the book of life in nature, they should be compatible. If we find something in nature that's not compatible with the scriptures, then we can question. Maybe we need to question our assumptions about what the scriptures are saying. So I kind of went off in a tangent there, but basically, the book of life in nature is relevant to our faith as Christians. I don't think we can just willy-nilly say, yeah, everything's compatible. And so, in the book of life, in nature, there are certain things that have been cited for hundreds and thousands of years as evidence of God. There's the order, there's the design of life, which a lot of these things have become a lot more controversial. Some have fallen out of favor, clearly, in the scientific community. Some of that is making a comeback, I think. But basically, though, if you look at nature, you can see things that resemble design. Features that look as though they've been designed for a purpose, which we know mind does that. A conscious mind does that. It designs things for specific purposes. But now we have evolution. It comes on the scene in a strong way when Darwin published his theory. And the thing about evolution is that Darwin argued that natural selection and random variation can mimic the work of a conscious mind. So now here's the situation. We see this evidence of apparent design, as Richard Dawkins calls it, apparent design. and now it's a question of, can nature do the same thing? Whereas before, a conscious mind was our only explanatory resource for these features, well, now Darwin has developed a theory saying we have an additional explanatory resource, nature. And since nature has been around long before humans, it's a much more powerful explanation.
Okay.
And so that is the challenge to the God hypothesis posed by evolutionary theory. I don't know if I explained that well, if I just rambled. But from my point of view, that's why it's such an important issue, because if evolution is true, then it provides an alternative, a, a strong alternative to the God hypothesis, which explains some of these design features.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
I do.
So, for that reason, yeah, I could say that God's compatible with evolution, but I don't feel like it's necessary to say that. I don't think the evidence shows that evolution is the strongest explanation. Um, and I won't get into the multifarious reasons why I think that right now. But one recent story that just came out just a couple days ago, maybe about a week ago. Now this comes from, I believe the.
Oh, lost you. Lost you, Brandon.
Yep.
Oh, there you are. I can hear you again.
Okay. Now there's an article in Live Science. I'm just going to hold my microphone here like I'm preaching or something. All right. Article in Live Science. You can look this up. The title is Earliest Human Species Possibly Found in Ethiopia. So basically there's a jawbone fragment of a human fossil, and this pushes back the origin of humans by about 400,000 years. So almost 500,000 years we've been pushed back here.
Okay.
So now why is that significant? Well, that is significant because as our science of evolution develops over time in light of new evidence, we ask the question, is evolution becoming a better explanation of the history and origin of life, or is it becoming a less powerful explanation of the history and origin of life? Now, some people might quibble with origin in my description of evolutionary theory, but that's another conversation for another time. So the question is, when the origin of humans is pushed back by 500,000 years, is that good or bad for evolutionary theory? And it seems to be bad because evolution requires time in order to operate. So by pushing back the origin of humans, that narrows the available time for evolution to work between the earliest humans and their latest common ancestors or their latest ape-like ancestors. So evolution has a much shorter amount of time to work with.
Okay.
Okay, so that's significant. Now, I also saw an additional story in the news, and having trouble pulling that up on my computer. But basically, I'll try to post links to all of this information after the discussion. But first of all, we've got the story that the timeline of humans has been pushed back by 500,000 years. Okay. Now, second of all, we've got another story that we've discovered a gene, a uniquely human gene,
Okay.
um, that determines brain growth. And
Oh.
so, yeah, it's really interesting. So we hear all the
Yeah.
time, humans and apes they're 99% similar in their genome. Now there are a number of problems with that. That number comes from only studying a very small percentage of the genomes, and I believe exclusively studying the regions which code for proteins. But if you look at the other regions, which are sometimes called the operating system of the genome, um, on average, if you include that in the average, then we're down to about the high 60s or low 70% similarity now with um, chimps and humans. So
uh,
we're very dissimilar, and now the question is, where's our common where's our common ancestor? And so the gap between ourselves and chimpanzees is widening. And now we have this new information that we have a very distinct feature in our genome that specifically determines arguably the feature that sets us apart from the other animals,
hmm.
our brains. So it's very cool.
Interesting.
But, um,
Interesting.
but it's another feature that evolution has to account for within an increasingly constrained time frame. So I think that uh, there's some information coming out, I think, regularly that makes the history of life more difficult to explain in terms of Darwinian processes.
Okay.
Now, the additionally here, um, we don't even know how exactly evolution works. So we can speculate about population genetics and the rate of mutations and stuff, but we don't actually know how it works. Some of you may be familiar with. Oh, I'm sorry, my computer's having issues again, so I'm distracted. There's a very famous chemist, biochemist, and this guy, he hangs out with Nobel laureates and everything, and he wrote this really long rant about nobody knows exactly how evolution actually works. And he talks to people all the time. Do you understand how evolution works? And the big secret is no, we don't actually know. We have ideas about how it might work, but we don't actually know how random variation plus natural selection, specifically with genetics, how it overcomes some of the observable limitations of that mechanism. So what we
Okay.
actually observe in the laboratory is statistical limitations to the mutation selection mechanism, but we haven't actually observed it. We haven't actually observed the kind of plasticity that is required for evolution to actually work in the way that Darwin described. So, so not only is the time frame increasingly constrained, and not only do we have more and more things that we need to explain, but we don't even know how it actually works in the first place in order to even speculate. So we hear all the time that evolution is as established as gravity, but how can that be true if we don't even know how it works? And
True.
we haven't observed the kind of evolution that Darwin theorized about. We've observed cyclical variation. but nothing on the order of what Darwin described. So
I'm close.
so now I know that people will want to tear me apart for that, but I'm sorry. I came to a place in college where I felt like evolution could be true. That's fine. I didn't even approach the subject until I was in college because I felt like it was a given fact. And I had decided that I had alternative reasons for believing in God, so I didn't really need evolution to be false at that time in my life. I've changed my mind on that since then, but not at the time when I was first delving into the issue. I
Okay.
just don't think the evidence is there.
Okay.
I mean,
I,
nobody knows how it works.
that's true.
Well, let me read you a quote from this article here. You know what? I will not read a quote because the browser has crashed.
Go figure.
Oh, no, wait. I think I got it back. All right. Now, this is a quote from the article about pushing the human origins back.
Okay.
Okay, now the research team co-leader and study co-author Brian Villamore, he's a paleoanthropologist at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, and he said there's a big gap in the fossil record between about 2.5 million and 3 million years ago. There's virtually nothing relating to the ancestors of Homo from that time period, in spite of a lot of people looking.
Huh.
So I thought that evolution was as established as gravity. This story just came out a week ago, and they're talking about there's no connection. Yeah, there's no connection between the ostensible ancestors and the humans. So we have, to clarify, we have some specimen that we believe could be ancestors of humans. And then we have human fossils. And between them we have a time gap. And we are trying to well, the question is, was there enough time for evolution to operate there? Well, this research pushes humans back by 500,000 years. So it constrains the timeline available for evolution to operate between the ostensible ancestors and the earliest humans by 500,000 years. So we see that evolutionary theory is further constrained. It is not further strengthened by this information.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense.
Oh, perfectly. Perfectly.
Yeah.
Now, to explore a few of those things, I'm just going over topics. Take notes. um, a few questions. You mentioned DNA and the human genome. Um, what about junk DNA?
Well, here's the funny thing about junk DNA. Okay. Let me kind of jump to another hot topic that theists are criticized for a lot, and I'm lumping in intelligent design theorists with the theists for provisionally,
Okay.
but now Michael Behe has put forth his theory of irreducible complexity. Now the problem, I don't personally use that argument very often.
Okay.
I think there are stronger arguments. I'm studying it to make sure that I understand it in its strongest form. It's called the principle of charity.
Hmm.
But I have not settled on a conclusion about it. Nevertheless, Mike Behe's theory about irreducible complexity is criticized
Oh, you just broke out. You just broke out.
that,
Oh, there you
like,
go. You're
if you
back.
have. Can you hear me?
There you go. I can hear you.
Okay. The idea is that you have a structure that. A functional structure where the removal of any one part will cause the loss of function.
Okay.
That definition, I think, is pretty easily testable. But the problem is when you try to use it as an argument for intelligent design or conscious design.
Okay.
Because just because it breaks down one function doesn't mean there isn't some other function that the structure could serve. Now, Ken Miller famously cites the example of the type 3 secretory system, which is a degradation of the flagellar motor. So, and basically this causes a, what's the word? I don't know if pathology is the right word here. That's psychology. I don't know. Basically, it makes the bugs into bad bugs. They can eject things into other cells. Now, using the
Okay.
type 3 secretory system, which is essentially an incomplete flagellar motor.
Okay.
So essentially, Ken Miller is saying, hey, here's another function. Just because it lost the function of the flagellar motor, just because it lost motility, doesn't mean that the partial structure has no function. Essentially, the criticism is this, that Mike Behe is arguing from ignorance. He is saying, I don't know what function there is, therefore there is no function, therefore intelligent design. Okay, fair enough, right?
Okay.
Isn't that exactly the same thing that evolutionists are saying about junk DNA? I
True.
don't know what the function is, therefore it has no function. And now we're finding that a lot of the junk DNA has function. I'm prepared to talk about it, but I would just encourage you to read up on that. A lot of the function is regulatory. We're finding that a lot of the junk DNA is the operating system, if you will,
Okay.
of the genome. And so, originally, well, back when we were studying the origin of life, proteins were the big thing, and we thought that proteins were responsible for heritable traits. And then Francis Collins came along with his sequence hypothesis, and we realized, oh, it's actually DNA is the big player here, and not just DNA, but the actual sequence of the base pairs.
Okay.
So now it's the genetic sequences of the base pairs that carry heritable information. Okay, so now proteins are not as big a deal, but we still carried some of that baggage. And so when we looked at the genome, we see that there are these regions that code for proteins. So from these triplets of base pairs, we get amino acids, which then polymerize and fold into proteins. But then we have all of these regions that don't code for proteins.
Okay.
And so we don't know what it does. So we think it's junk. Because we're in that evolutionary frame of reference, interpretive framework. Well, now we're finding that junk DNA is regulatory, and regulatory essentially means it switches things off and on. In particular, retroviruses are now being found to be regulatory.
Okay.
I'm not even going to try to describe it because I'll probably embarrass myself, but I'll try to look up some better information about it, maybe to post. But essentially, it's an argument about vestigial features. This is an argument that goes back to Darwin. Darwin, in his Origin of Species, he cited vestigial organs and various features as evidence of natural selection, or evidence of evolution by natural selection. And his argument was that these features at one time served a function, and now there are other features that have obviated the need for these earlier features, and they've lost function. They'll eventually disappear, probably.
Okay.
Okay, now the appendix has been cited as a vestigial feature, the spleen, etc., etc., etc. And then you have junk DNA, which is essentially a more modern version of a vestigial feature. But we found a function for the appendix, we found function for the spleen, and now did we really think that DNA would be any different? We found a lot of function for junk DNA. So, over and over and over again, since Darwin, the vestigial, the argument about vestigial features has failed constantly. And it was precarious in the first place because it is an argument from ignorance. We don't know what the function is, therefore it has no function, therefore evolution via natural selection. So yeah, hey, you can criticize Behe for inferring intelligent design from the irreducible complexity of certain structures, but you can't do that and not also criticize arguments about junk DNA or Darwin's argument about vestigial features.
So if I'm understanding you correct, you're saying that junk DNA is more or less just activated at different points when it's needed across different parts of its DNA, across the strand.
You know what? I'm not sure if I'll be able to describe that accurately right
Okay.
now without reading up on it a little bit, but
Sounds
essentially
like
it
on and off switches.
regulates the expression of other genes. Like you've
Oh,
got
okay.
the the regions for protein coding, and it would regulate those regions,
Okay.
which actually it would regulate the regions that actually produce the proteins. That's my
Okay.
understanding at this very moment. It could change 5 minutes from now. But that's a very basic
Well, kind of
idea.
like, so kind of like when you're working out, use at different points you're using different muscle groups. So kind of like that, there's certain parts of the DNA that's being used during different tasks. Is that what you're saying? That's what it
Yes,
sounds like.
DNA switched on and off
Yes, almost like a digital code
all the
almost.
time. Yeah, I mean, it is not merely a code, it is an actual information system. If you
Okay.
think about what does an operating system on your computer do? Operating system on your computer chooses when to execute which code based upon multifarious conditions.
Right.
Well, the genome regulates, see, both are regulates the expression of.
Oh, you just faded out.
So, in a literal sense, it is an information processing system. It is an operating system in a very literal sense, which is really astounding.
Nice.
And this goes back to what we were talking about when you were talking about theology and everything, about getting caught up in words and terminologies and jargon and stuff, to where we actually lose what these things even mean in the first place. I think sometimes we do that when we're looking at a computer on our desk or a laptop or our phones, versus when we look at these systems that occur in nature, the genetic system. in the genome. And we don't realize that we might call one thing the genome, and we might call the other thing the operating system and the binary code or whatever. But it's really, if you look at what it's actually doing, how it's actually functioning, and even if you look at it mathematically, the distribution of signal components across the genome, you'll see that they are the same thing. They're not even just similar. They are the same in very important ways. And that, I think, for me, is the strongest evidence of the existence of God.
Okay. Very cool. Well, yeah, you mentioned differences in DNA between, say, us and like chimpanzees.
Mm.
So what was it? There was if there's a 96% similarity, that sounds like a lot.
Sure,
But
sounds
one,
like
but one thing I heard somebody say is that, well, it sounds like a lot until you realize that there are billions of pieces of information. So by going into saying that we are 96% similar, what you're actually saying is that there's still millions of differences.
right. So right, exactly. So now you're touching again on the time constraint problem. Even if it was 99% similar, you've still got a whole lot of code that you still got to deal with. You've still
Yeah.
got to evolve all of that in order to account for the difference between us and chimpanzees. Um, sorry, getting
Okay.
messages.
Oh, fade it out again.
Similarity.
Up there.
Um, Again, we don't even know how evolution actually works, how it actually overcomes the observed cyclic processes, or yeah. So we don't even know how it works, and then we have a whole lot that we have to account for. Now, 99% makes it sound small. It actually is a lot. But now, when we actually look at a larger portion of the genomes, um, you mentioned we're going back down to 96%. But now when you look at those regions that don't code for proteins, the operating system, that's where a lot of the differences are. That's where you find the similarity, something more like 50%. Now if you average it out, maybe on the whole we're about 70% similarity.
Okay.
But the differences are in important places. It's in the operating system. But
So,
if you think about it, okay, humans and chimpanzees, we look similar just intuitively, wouldn't it? I'm not saying that this actually makes sense if you actually understand the science, but for if humans and chimps look similar, wouldn't it make sense that the building blocks, the proteins, would look kind of similar?
yeah.
The proteins are the things that actually build the animal, the organism.
Yeah.
They're the building blocks. I
Well,
That's
well, you
probably specious reasoning, but I don't think we should be so surprised that the building blocks are similar.
well,
But
you think that all uh, carbon-based life systems have to share something common.
yeah, carbon, but also DNA, the genetic code. Um, but here's the thing: I had a conversation with somebody on Google Plus about that similarity. There's a guy, Theobald, I think. Now, he claims that he's done some kind of statistical analysis of genes and has found strong statistical evidence that favors common descent over polyphyletic origin of life. So instead of multiple roots at the bottom of the tree of life, where life arose spontaneously at multiple different points, he's saying he's found strong evidence that there was a single root, a single or very few roots at the origin of life. He says he's built a strong statistical case for this. Now, I was discussing this with somebody, and this person was an evolutionist and was insisting that this was an argument for common descent. But my argument was that no, it's not. It distinguishes between monophyletic or polyphyletic tree of life. It doesn't distinguish between a naturalistic origin of life or a designed, an intelligently designed, or immaterial or spiritual origin of life. It doesn't even address the question. It doesn't even make a distinction. And in order to do that, you have to explain why a naturalistic explanation of the similarities is a stronger explanation of similarity than common design. And that question is never addressed.
Okay.
So you're quite right that we would expect carbon-based life to exhibit similarity. It would be quite wrong to say that that similarity favors a naturalistic interpretation over a non-naturalistic or design interpretation.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So so along those lines, and I'm fairly open-minded on this one, and I do lean towards intelligent design myself. Um, I do leave space open though for the possible gap theory because there is in Genesis there is the thought process behind the gap theory. There's a small break in the Genesis account.
Mm.
So there potentially could have been something that happened between the creation of Earth and mankind, or even creatures. And there is the gap theory that does leave space open for something that potentially could have happened during that time.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, one of those very controversial things that scholars quibble over. No one really knows, and the most honest scholars will tell you that they just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that could also explain why some creation looks so old, but pardon me, but uh, things that have actual DNA appear to be much more young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, Interestingly, I know that a lot of the people in our community, they probably, I know that a lot of them do hold a young Earth creationist point of view, which is fine with me. I don't particularly share that point of view. Um, for me, it would be problematic because of some things that I've been reading and learning about the fossil record. There do seem to be discernible patterns within the fossil record, and I think it's pretty hard to explain that in terms of a global flood. So I favor that, and I think that the patterns are actually less favorable to Darwinism. I think that Darwin recognized this problem in his day, and it has persisted and even exacerbated since then. So I think, from my perspective, it is far more favorable or less, or at least far less favorable to an evolutionary point of view to interpret the fossil record from the point of view of long ages, which seems counterintuitive. But
Okay.
it's not merely a question of proving that. Well, like creationists, they'll try to constrain the time available for evolution. They'll say that the long age theory of the Earth, that's just the product of evolutionary theory needing all of that time to operate, and so we arbitrarily just said that the Earth is old and manufactured evidence for that or whatever. I think it actually puts evolution in a more precarious position to say, okay, yeah, the Earth's been around for a while. We observe these fossils in the fossil record, but the pattern that they exhibit is exactly opposite in important ways of what Darwin predicted.
Okay.
So it's not merely that evolution didn't have enough time to operate, which is an important question for some things, as we discussed earlier. It's a question of positive patterns which contradict specific predictions that Darwin made, directly contradict. It's not just an inability of evolutionary theory to account for something, it is a direct contradiction of evolutionary theory. And if you try to interpret the fossil record from a young Earth creationist point of view, you lose that direct contradiction.
Okay.
You're going back to this is something evolutionary theory is inadequate in explaining, which I think is a much weaker argument than saying this pattern we observe directly contradicts evolutionary theory. So for that reason, I think it makes more sense, and I think it's a stronger argument.
Okay. What do you think of somebody like Gerald Schroeder, who proposes that the 8 days of creation are an expansion from quanta? And
Yeah, I watched that video, and it's absolutely fascinating. We should probably repost that in the community because it's really interesting. Um, I would definitely like to look into that more. And what's the most interesting is that, from his point of view, the appearance of certain groups of animals in the fossil record seems to coincide with the Genesis account,
yeah,
which
doesn't
that's
it?
mind blowing to me.
It is.
That's really mind because we've heard the old tale that the physicists they were climbing the mountain or whatever, and up at the top they discovered that theologians had been there all along because theologians had said that the universe just appeared, bang, there it was. Whereas up to a certain point, the dominant theory was a steady state model of the cosmos. But it's not merely that; it's also potentially that the Bible describes the order in which groups of animals, groups of phyla, appeared on the earth accurately, which we had no independent evidence of until very recently, until the
Right.
past 200 years
Yeah.
or so.
That is mind blowing.
That's something I really want to look more into. I want to dig into that.
Yeah, I love the fact that I stumbled on him because that theory just when it took me a while just to comprehend that.
And even if his math isn't directly on, which I don't know if that's true or not. Regardless, he pointed out that Genesis seems to describe the appearance of life in the order in which it seems to appear in the fossil record. I have to
Yeah.
actually look. I have not actually double checked that for myself, but it's an interesting point that I would love to explore.
Yeah. Yeah. It could actually answer a lot of questions too. That could definitely answer a lot of questions
Yep.
just from a timeline point of view.
Mm-hmm. His particular theory, yeah. It's almost
Yeah.
a hybrid, there's that word again, of young Earth and old Earth,
Yeah.
if that's how you want to make the distinction.
Well, and the Genesis account actually can allow for that. It could because even if you look at the description, some people have argued they were like, well, the Earth was already here. I said because if you look at Genesis 1:1, the Earth is already here. But everybody fails to going into verse 2, everybody always fails to go back to the original wording because in the original wording, it actually says that the earth was there, but it was unseen and unprepared. I mean, that could mean that it's just molecules. It could just be floating molecules. It doesn't say that it was an actual planet. It doesn't say that it was solid. In fact, it says it was without form. So that could easily accommodate uh, the creator taking the building blocks of life and then pushing them out over the next 6 days of creation, which according to Josh Schroeder is 15 billion years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really fascinating theory. Absolutely, it's fascinating. I'd never heard that before. But again, I mean, that all the more strengthens my preference for the older interpretation.
Yeah,
Um, I think it's a stronger theory, it's a stronger criticism of evolutionary theory, and then it opens up the opportunity for the natural book of life in nature to
yeah,
corroborate the scriptural book of life.
I agree.
So, on multiple fronts, I think it actually strengthens um, the Christian faith more so than a young Earth, in my opinion. In my opinion,
I
which is
would.
counterintuitive, I think, for most people. But I think that's what makes most sense to me, though.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's I find it completely fascinating. Um, and I've proposed it to other people that I've met, uh, many of whom are not. And proposing the idea to them in principle, they could not say no. In fact, they stopped and they said, I've never heard that before. I have to look that up. And so they actually asked for his name and everything else because they really honestly wanted to hear his interpretation because let's face it, what we know of abiogenesis and the theory of evolution up to this point is predominantly theory. I mean, there's you know some solid evidence behind some of it, but at the same point, it's a lot of theory, and so they were very excited to get another viewpoint on
Well, Aaron, gravity is a theory too.
that.
No,
It's
but I
funny you say
understand what you're saying.
that.
Uh, it's made out as though we've solved the problem when we have not solved the problem. It
Right.
remains the case that mind is the only known producer of digital information systems. And hey, we're still trying to figure out how nature can do it. It doesn't mean we figured it out, which doesn't mean that which doesn't mean that nature is an alternative explanatory resource. It has not achieved that yet.
Yeah. Hey, we can't even figure out quanta. We know how to use it, but we don't can't figure it out.
I certainly can't figure it out.
A theory I love to study, but I will never fully embrace, or not embrace, but grasp.
All right. Well, I think we've hit a pretty good stopping point. What do you think, Aaron?
I think so. I think you did an excellent job explaining genetics and everything that entailed.
Thanks. It might be the case I know just enough to be dangerous, and I know a lot of people who will say that, but I'll probably have a lot easier time defending my comments in the comments on Google Plus than off the top of my head here when I'm wrestling with technology and my source is not showing up on my browser.
That could be difficult.
But I look forward to those conversations. Unless they're coming from Bruce. No, I'm just kidding, Bruce. Just kidding.
Yeah.
uh,
He's actually had a couple of good comments lately. I gotta say, him and I've actually agreed on a few things. We
oh, cool.
both of us could not make heads or tails out of actually agreeing to believe in Calvinism. You know, we've actually came to a couple of viewpoints that we actually agree on.
Oh, that's very cool. Hey, maybe our approach to Christian apologetics communities is working. If we can have a conversation with Bruce and actually agree on even menial things or theological things, I mean that's some progress, I think.
Yeah, I'll give him a plug too, in case he watches this later. I will give him a plug. Uh, his photography is actually brilliant. So
I did not know that.
I actually had to join his photography group because Bruce's photography is actually brilliant. It's very good.
I did not know that he was a photographer. That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So, the conclusion of all of this is check out Bruce Lindman's, if I'm saying that right, photography.
That's right.
All right. Well, I guess we're going to sign off, and maybe we'll do it again sometime. Maybe we'll have a little more of a structured format, a few more participants. We'll see what happens. We'll see what we can schedule. But I enjoyed the conversation. Aaron, it's been real. Thank you for sharing your knowledge about theology and all of that other stuff. I don't know what you would call it, but and your perspective, which is challenging and unique. I think it's important to be challenging, especially in apologetics, because
Thank you.
apologetics is not just about defending your faith. It's about developing a defensible faith.
I agree. Well, I fully appreciated your outlook and your explanations into science and genetics too.
I do what little I possibly can.
That makes two of us.
All right, well, I guess we're going to sign off. Thanks everybody who watched and who will watch, and we will catch y'all in the Christian apologetics community on Google Plus. Have a good
Sweet.
night, everybody.